This is the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.
Welcome in to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Mike, Leslie, Andrew Cely back with you once again. If you've seen the viral moment of Dak Prescott talking about just how bad this Dallas Cowboys football team is, I can't say what he said. Yes, Dak Prescott, you are correct, and I don't see it changing anytime soon.
It is November, but it might as well be February because it is Groundhog's Day, and we've done this show now for 3 out of the last 4 weeks, and the only reprieve was a bye week where we focused on the Mavs for a little bit. Either way, we have a lot to dissect. So let's get right into it with What's on the Show, sponsored by NFM.
Here's What's on the Show, sponsored by NFM.
Hey, I mean, the Mavs have gotten off to a great start. The Stars are right in the thick of the Western Conference standings early, but no, we have to talk about your 3-5 Dallas Cowboys officially in free fall after a tough loss in Atlanta. Somehow, we're going to try and make this show different from the last few weeks, and we'll definitely do it with our top 5. But I'm going to hold back on the topic this time because there is a special twist. Leslie was lame and he looked ahead, so don't spoil it, Mike, or there will be a confrontation.
I'm not spoiling a thing.
That's what's on the show, Mike. Now, who is on the show?
On the show today from the Athletic, Saad Yousuf and what's this dude's name? I always forget. Trahan, right? Joe Trahan, our WFA lead anchor, here with us as well tonight. Fellas, here we go again. 3 straight losses for the Dallas Cowboys. They are 3-5. The schedule only gets tougher from here. Joe, where does this team go from here?
Listen, man, they need to go back to work. Let's see, 9 more penalties today. Too many pre-snap penalties. It shows a lack of focus, a lack of discipline. They give up 3 sacks to a team that only had 6 sacks in the previous 7 games. Issues there. Dak Prescott is hurt. We don't know for how long. But, yeah, just go back to work. And let's see if you can show a little more discipline. And listen, I know this roster isn't great, but they can be better than they're playing, and I would like to see that.
Saad, Joe mentioned it. Dak Prescott hurt. CeeDee Lamb battling through an AC joint sprain reportedly all through the second half of this football game. They're banged up enough as it is on the defensive side of the ball. They can't afford for it to be the case on the offensive side, too. It just keeps getting worse for this team.
Yeah, and, you know, when you talk about the offense, it just seems like nothing comes easy. And you know, that was my takeaway from the touchdown that they scored with Dak Prescott at quarterback, not counting that last one that Cooper Rush scored. I mean, that touchdown, it took everything to go right. I mean, it was a jailbreak in Dak's face. It was a bobble in the end zone by Rico on his back, catching the ball. And, I mean, it's just nothing is coming easy for this offense right now. And so you're right. They can't afford these injuries. And the guys that you mentioned, Dak and CD, those are their 2 focal points of the offense. So it's really discouraging the fact that not only are they 3-5 and everything looks difficult, but things look like they're going to get more difficult as we progress from here.
I'm glad you brought that up about getting more difficult because it really felt like early in this game, going forward on 4th and 1 in the second quarter, when the game is still relatively in reach, you got 2.5 quarters left to play, and you're starting to go for it at that part in the game. That was kind of the first warning sign. And then every 4th down after that they went for it, it kind of felt like, well, we went for it earlier in the game, now we got to go for it here. And it never really felt like they were consistently picking great plays. Like the jet sweep to CeeDee Lamb didn't feel like the best play call in that scenario, even though that, you know, they finally found some running game at a certain point in the game. It looked like they burst off. Dak showed them some mobility. That helped open up the run game a little bit at that point. And I think the other thing was the first series for the Cowboys, especially where Dak was pushing the ball downfield and it was high up-tempo, really quick offense, that looked like last year's team, and then it vanished all of a sudden in 2 or 3 incomplete passes. So as usual, we're left kind of dissecting a game where there are elements that look like they can be good, and yet there's a desperation, there's unforced errors that kind of turn the tide. Mike, I'm curious, was there a point for you where that all of a sudden warning lights started flashing?
I mean, honestly, the cruel irony that finally we did see Dak Prescott run the football, and then he gets hurt. It's almost like Jerry foretold this earlier this week on the radio. Joe, it looked like you were about to get in there. What was your point?
Well, no, a couple things. You know, I did like the way they started the game, right? But the pressure kept coming back in Dak's face, and I wanted to point out something that Saad tweeted out because it's so perfect. On the touchdown to Rico Dowdle, He captured the moment when Dak is just fighting for his life to find some space, but there is one offensive lineman who absolutely has his man walled off in perfect form, and it's Tyler Smith. The other 4 guys, good luck, because that's what it's been, and that's how tough it's been. That should have been an easy touchdown catch for Rico Dowdle, but he made it harder because he made himself catch it twice, because it wasn't good enough the first time. And that feels like a microcosm of what we have seen from this team, and it is, listen, it's becoming hard to watch. I will say this, they kept fighting throughout this game, no matter what happened, so good on them. But if they wouldn't have played so bad from the beginning, they wouldn't have had to fight so hard at the end.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive line and the struggles there. Tyler Smith, yes, on that one play. The concern for me is I think we might be seeing the beginning of the end for Zach Martin. We keep seeing moments where it's going in the wrong direction. More to come on your 3-5 Dallas Cowboys after this on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show.
Today's headlines, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers.
Here's a look around the rest of the NFC East. Washington staves off a late Giants rally to win 27-22, improving to 7-2 on the season. And in similar fashion, the Eagles hold off the Jags comeback to win 28-23. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, and Philly are now 6-2 and come to Dallas next Sunday. I will repeat what I said last week after headlines. The hole for the Cowboys just gets that much bigger as they try and climb even closer to a division race that is running away. Saad, we cut you off last time heading to break. You wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, to your point, you were asking where it felt like everything turned around. To me, I think it was that fake punt at the beginning of the third quarter when you really talk about where the game really took a turn. At that point, you're down 4. You're less than 2 minutes into the third quarter. I'm not saying the Cowboys were playing well, but they were in the game very much. And I think, you give Kirk Cousins that short field. All of a sudden, that 4-point deficit turns into a much bigger one. And I think that's where the game really turned for the Cowboys in a lot of ways. So that was disappointing, as was the fact that they weren't able to pick up 1 yard multiple times. You mentioned that 4th and 1. That CD had, it was 3rd and 1 before that. When you can't pick up 1 yard in 2 tries, things are not going well.
Zeke Elliott not making the trip, disciplinary issues there. I understand disciplinary issues are at the root of why he didn't make the trip. Kind of feels like the beginning of the process of turning the page at the running back position, and it also kind of feels like it's about time.
Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, listen, in terms of the running back position, I mean, Rico Dowdle, 12 carries, 75 yards, 6.3 per carry. I mean, that's the closest thing we've seen to a functional running game all season long. So, listen, man, we call this from the jump. When they signed Zeke in the offseason, here's what I said. Zeke has been a warrior for this franchise. I would not, want to talk bad about Zeke, but Father Time is undefeated, and we're seeing the vestiges of that when we look at Zeke Elliott try and play football right now. He was tough on his body on the field. I don't know how nice he was to his body off the field either. So listen, man, if they have to move on, they have to move on. I suspect, though, because Jerry has a ton of affinity for Zeke Elliott, they will try and calm the waters, mend those fences. I think it might be on Zeke to try and decide that he wants to take the role that they have, and if he does, I think he can ride this thing out. If not, it could get interesting.
So another key point in this football game was the second touchdown for Atlanta to go up 14-3 in this game, and I need to be artful in how I say this, but Trayvon Diggs was at minimum a part of and potentially responsible for a bust in coverage that led to the Darnell Mooney touchdown reception that really kind of not blew this game open, but certainly put Dallas in a 2-score hole and put them in trouble in this football game. And frankly, he did look lost on the play, trying to figure out which one of the wide receivers in the Atlanta stack was his man.
Trayvon, if you're watching this.
And by the way, real quick on that.
He's over there. Leave him alone. Saad, go ahead.
Just a quick point on that to further just how much trouble the Cowboys have been in. That 4th and 1 play that Mike's talking about came after the Cowboys called a timeout. So they regrouped and they got together, and that was the result of the play.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, that one, and then the other 4th and 1 that they went for on the offensive side of the ball, where it looked like they were ready to go, and all of a sudden, pre-snap penalty, 12 men in the huddle, which seems like a pretty basic thing, especially at that point in the game.
That one was bad. Turning
a 4th and 1 and a potential rally into a 4th and 6 and a punt. I think that was another one that was very indicative of where the Cowboys are as a whole right now.
They are still way too penalized a football team. It's not as bad as it's been maybe at points in years gone by, but it's still a problem, and it was a big problem today, and more than anything else, untimely. That's a huge point in the football game where they could have continued a march back into the game, potentially gone down and tied the football game, and instead they've got to punt it away.
So no Zeke for the foreseeable future. No Dak, question mark. Saad, what?
How long is the Cooper rush time?
Where do they go from here where Cooper's the quarterback, sure, but does Trey Lance see playing time? Like, what does this team do here?
Yeah, I think, look, if you're trying to look for a glimmer of hope, obviously the Cooper rush has gone 4-1 with Mike McCarthy in an extended period of time where Dak Prescott missed some time. But that was a whole different football team, whole different situation. I think it's just so hard to say because you talk about complementary football, and when the offense is down, you need the defense to pick them up. But the defense is down as well right now. And Deron Bland hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. Micah Parsons hasn't practiced all week. It's tough to say that either one of them is on the brink of returning. I wish I could tell you anything positive right now, Andrew, but I just can't come up with anything.
3-8 heading to Thanksgiving. That's the reality staring them in the face.
We'll find out. All right, stay with us on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Coming up, the top 5.
And now it's time for the top 5, sponsored by the Fort Worth Convention and Visitors Bureau.
That's right. Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. It is time for the top 5, Joe. Just making sure you're ready. Now, last week, Joe and I were running in studio here for our lives trying to get the show on air, so we missed our chance to comment on the biggest story of that Niners loss.
What?
Our own Mike Leslie getting into it a little bit with Cowboys cornerback Trayvon Diggs. And in honor of that, we're doing a top 5 athlete media confrontations. But there is a twist. These are not the 5.
A little bit for this.
These are not the 5 best or worst. These are the 5 levels of confrontation. Have anyone seen Gabriel Iglesias? Like there's 5 levels of fatness. These are the 5 levels of confrontation with examples of each level for this.
Man, I didn't expect that reference tonight.
There you go. All right, let's start things off with number 5. And a benign start to this one. Kevin Garnett undressing the late, great Craig Sager. Sager loved his flamboyant clothes. NBA players, not so much. During a one-on-one interview, Garnett, in deadpan serious tone, told Sager he needed to take off his suit and burn it multiple times. I don't think Sager obliged, but the result was hilarious anyway. Saad, we'll start here with you. Do you remember this altercation? And not really an altercation, but event.
Absolutely, I do. I remember watching it live actually, and it was great. And it was two guys that Kevin Garnett, somebody who's known for his intimidating demeanor, and Craig Sager, just the sweetest guy. So when you put both of them, and the biggest thing that's important here is that how much respect Garnett always had for Sager, and that just made it all the much better.
100%. Respect made that interaction. Not so much for the next 4 on this list. We'll move on to the number 4 slot, and this is where things start to ramp up. Deion dousing McCarver. In 1992, Deion Sanders was playing for both the Braves and the Falcons while the Braves were trying to clinch the pennant. He played for both teams on the same day, including a playoff game. Baseball analyst Tim McCarver didn't like Deion's choice to do so, criticized him on air, and Sanders decided to dump a giant tub of water on McCarver after the Braves clinched the pennant in the locker room. McCarver, none too happy. You can probably imagine that. Deion had the last laugh there, Joe. Do you remember this moment?
Oh, do I remember it? I was watching it live. And listen, the best word here for what Deion did was petulant. It was childlike. It was arrogant. It was immature. It was, by and large, uncalled for. And listen, I don't agree with all the things that McCarver had to say about Deion, because I thought the criticism he had for Deion was unfair, but I still think that you don't cross that line. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
I mean, fair enough. The reason why this one's a little bit lower on the list, it got physical, but not too physical. That changes here at number 3. It's one our station knows very well. Former WFAA sports anchor Dale Hansen got into it with Barry Switzer at Cowboys training camp. Switzer started actually punching Hansen's arm during the interview and levied incorrect accusations that Hansen had manufactured stories about a power struggle amongst the coaching staff. I could go on, but Mike, please take over for me. What do you think about this at number 3?
the all-timer, at least here. Nothing will ever top that moment. That was Channel 8 history at its finest. And yeah, sure, number 3 is fine in the pantheon of all of these events, but yeah, that one's way up there on the list.
Again, ramping it up just a little bit. This one, we raised the volume a lot more. All right. Mike Gundy with a legendary rant at a press conference, bashing a local columnist takedown of a kid on the OK State roster. The most famous line, "Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. This level represents all the times that coaches' verbal tirades fly off the handle. Saad, what do you think about this one popping in at number 2?
It just makes me feel so old. He was 40, and that was almost 20 years ago. I mean, that's just so crazy. But yeah, I mean, that was absolutely a legendary one as well. And it came into focus a lot more with the way that he handled the running back situation, getting in trouble off the field before the season this year.
The impression was pretty good, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not going for the mullet, though. That's never coming.
Please don't.
But never. All right, and last but not least, at number 1, simultaneously hilarious, unsettling, and actually totally deserved, Jim Rome versus Jim Everett. Rome had called Everett Chris Everett, the tennis star, to mock his play and simultaneously question his manhood. When the two finally sat down for a one-on-one interview, Rome said it again to Everett's face multiple times until Everett leapt up, flipped the table, and pushed Rome to the ground. Joe, we'll go to you for this one. Do you remember this one, and do you think it's a deserved number 1?
Do I remember that one? So after that happened, Jim Everett actually ended up playing with the New Orleans Saints when I worked in New Orleans as a sportscaster. So I remember it. I've heard about it firsthand. It became a pretty good joke. It became a great story. And listen, Jim Rome asked for it.
Yeah.
And he got it, right? He found out. And listen, it happens sometimes, and it's not the way I would do it. Because, again, I think there's a line that we should all have. We should all remain professional in this thing. And I think he crossed that line, and that gave Everett the license to do the exact same thing. And it is a moment. I do think it belongs number 1. I like the list. I do think that Hansen and Switzer should be number 2 because, I mean, the mullet's the mullet, right? I mean, he's still talking and saying goofy stuff. So I would downgrade him because he hasn't kept his rhetoric in great form. I'll leave it at that.
That's fair. Saad, is there anyone that came to mind when you heard this topic, first of all, or heard that Mike got into a tiff last week? I'm just curious.
Saad was right there.
Yeah, I'll mention 2 quick ones real quick. One was Richard Sherman going at Skip Bayless, telling him that he's better at life than him. That was a good one. And then the other one just happened yesterday. Joel Embiid against Marcus Hayes. That just happened in the locker room yesterday. So I know you did it in honor of Mike and Trayvon Diggs, but when you talk about an actual physical confrontation, that happened yesterday in the Sixers room. Yeah,
100%. There were enough segues to trying to bring this list around. I was thankful that happened so it didn't feel too out of the norm when it brought up. Mike, do you have anything to say for yourself?
You're welcome for providing you a little bit of content.
Thank you so much. All right, that's it for the top 5. Stay with us. Mike's final take is coming up. Saad, Joe, thank you so much for your time tonight.
And let's move on. Good night, fellas. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Time now for Mike's final take.
I keep hearing from Cowboys fans that what it's going to finally take to change Jerry's mind about all of this is when Cowboys fans stop buying tickets, stop buying merchandise, stop going to games, stop watching on TV. To quote Judge Smails from Caddyshack, well, we're waiting. This is the time. This is the football team. This is the worst Cowboys team since maybe 2010. Yes, 2015 and 2020 were bad football teams. There were injured quarterbacks that were reasons. Tony Romo, 2 broken collarbones. Dak Prescott, broken ankle. Those seasons are explainable. This is a bad football team that is the byproduct of a bad football offseason. You reap what you sow, and so many of you Cowboys fans want to tell me that you want to do this. What are you waiting for?
I'm just surprised you didn't rehash the same final take that you did a couple weeks ago when you're saying don't save the season. It's like we keep having the same
that
thing.
Too,
yes.
That too. Don't go bother trading for anybody, Jerry.
I'm just saying
there's no point.
We have how many weeks left to do this? So this is week 9 or week 10?
That was week 9. There are 9 games left in the season.
Either way, so we got to come up with 9 different ways to say this for the remainder of the year.
It's time to say goodnight. We'll see if we can make this different next week. It's on the Cowboys.
That's always the goal. That's always the goal. Have a good night, everybody.
Been the ultimate Dallas sports show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.